Hi you guys, I am going to show how to change out the blades on the 12-inch Potter shear. Eventually you're going to wear the blades out if you use this thing enough. And the blades are four-sided, so they can be rotated 4 times before they ever need to be sharpened again, which is probably a lifetime for most people. But you're going to need to do it someday. And I want to make sure you know how to do it, because there's a lot of shears out there and no one has ever told anyone how to do it. And what it is, this is really important, because I know there's a bunch of people who struggle with this problem with their shears. Not just with my shear, but any shear. When you put a piece of metal in here and it bends the metal over between the blades instead of cutting it cleanly, that's because either the blades are dull or the gap between the blades is too large. The gap is very important, and it can vary depending on where you are in the blade and what's going on with the frame of the shear and what's been done with the shear. So I'm going to show you how to do this. It's very easy, and how to shim your blades out. To do this, you're going to need a 3/4 inch wrench and a 3/4 inch socket. You can get away with just 2 3/4 inch wrenches. So here's what we do. We're going to start with the bottom blade first, because that's where all the shims are based. These are shims. They're made of paper. And what they do is they close the gap between the blades so that you get proper cutting action. They're usually pretty tight. I'm going to go along and loosen all these up first. This comes out, and now it's loose. So I'm going to lift this up, and you can see that this is loose. This particular shear doesn't have any shims in it right now. Sometimes they have shims, sometimes they don't. It depends on the thickness of the blade when it's being surface ground for sharpness. There's a lot of factors that go in to whether or not you'll need to shim a part or not. Shims are not good or bad. There's nothing wrong. It's just a standard way of gapping blades. So here's the blade. Here's your 4 edges right here. So this one, we're just going to go with 1 shim. And they fit, they just lay on the back like this. You can just use paper, that's all it is. There's nothing special about it, it's just paper. Set it up in there, put your bolts on. And I'll show you when we start testing this to see where we are as far as the gap on the blade. Because sometimes you're going to have a different gap. You're going to have more shims in one area than another. It all depends on how the shear has been used, who's been using it, what they've been cutting. Things wear differently over time. So you're going to want to tighten this up good before you ever close it, because you can crash your blades together. They'll collide, and then it'll ruin the blades. So this is perfect. What I'm going to do is test it by cutting a sheet of paper. not absolutely necessary that it cut paper, but if it does, you know you're in the ballpark. So let's see where we're at. So it did a pretty good job. One little area didn't cut. Probably not a big deal. That time, pretty good cut all the way across. Let's check up here. See, we're a little loose up here in the front. There's some things that can be done. We can check this piece right here that tightens around that. What this does is, when you're cutting, the shear wants to push away. So what this does here is it keeps the front of the shear from moving out of the way. And so what we could do, we could add a bit of a shim up to the front here to close that gap. But I'm going to test it with a piece of metal first before we do that, because this is a metal shear, it's not a paper shear. And it cut metal perfectly. It did a perfect job. So we're probably tight enough. I like to take little tiny pieces and test it all the way down the blade. So let's test at the far end here. A little bit of a burr. Nothing that most people would ever worry about. You can't really see it with the naked eye, but I can feel a little bit of a burr at the very end. So I could add another piece of paper in this front inch or so. The next adjustment that you can make with this shear is this angle here. And this is called the rake. If you have this blade, this determines how much of the blade is engaging the metal at any one time. This is your actual point of engagement here. So if I was to lower this up front, we could have an entire 12 inches of engagement and you would never get through the piece of metal. It would require tons of pressure. But we're only engaging maybe a half inch of the metal at any one time as you cut through it. So it gets it's a lot easier to cut with. So in order to achieve a rake, these blades are slotted, and this will drop down in here. And then this one goes all the way to the top of the channel, and this one drops to the bottom. And that determines your rake. Let me show you. Close the shear so you don't cut your fingers off. Alright. So right now this blade is completely loose. I want this side completely up and this side all the way down. The blades on the top of the shear are the exact same blades that are on the bottom of the shear. They can be interchanged. I've tried to make everything as standard on this shear as I possibly can so that it's easily repaired no matter what you do to it. I'm going to lower this blade now that I've got it tightened up a little bit. That's how you adjust the rake. If you need less rake, the less rake you have, the harder it's going to be to push this handle down because you're engaging more of the cut. When you have maximum rake like this thing walks right through 16 gauge. As you get further up here, you're losing leverage, so it requires a little bit more effort than back here. This shear will easily cut 14 gauge stainless. So it'll easily do just about anything that a bench jeweler would want to do. That's about all we've got. If you have any questions, please give us a call. Thanks for watching.